What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
Does your book, film, resource, product, or business change people's lives for the better? Hi, I'm Jackie Lappin, founder of Conscious Media Relations, a unique boutique PR firm that helps you connect with your mind, body, spirit, and conscious lifestyle audience in a big way. We reach 3,500 specialty media and all the key mainstream outlets in the United States. I invite you to explore our radio media tour that connects to 2,600 personal growth radio shows. There is just nothing else like it. Come check out our website and read our rave reviews.
The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online, you're now watching the UK's only alternative late-night talk show. And I'm Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Adam Bulger, who is a professional writer whose byline has appeared in the Huffington Post, The Believer, USA Today, and elsewhere. He was a founding editor of the hyperlocal news network Patch.com. Now, most recently, he's written for The Mid and Van Winkles, and he joins me today to talk about details of a string of unexplained overnight deaths between 1977 and 81, said to have inspired the late Wes Craven to create the iconic Freddy Krueger character of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Adam Bulger, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. Welcome to thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on, Adam, and a really fascinating story this as well. The sudden and unexplained sleep death that inspired Freddy Krueger, but inspired Wes Craven. Adam, just tell me a little bit about your background as well.
Oh, sure. Well, I've been a professional journalist for about 20 years. I've written for newspapers, written for websites, written for magazines. I've been published in Forbes, The Believer. I was one of the original editors for a local news network in America called Patch. which was subsequently purchased by AOL and became a national site. And I live in New Jersey, and with my wife and my daughter and my cat, who I think is going to make some cameos in this video. Yeah, that's me. Mm-hmm.
Just to begin with then, Adam, just explain to the audience, how did you get involved in this story and looking at the backstory to the Wes Craven movies?
Sure. Well, it was a story that was initially assigned to me. Wes Craven, in a lot of interviews and in a lot of documentaries, he talks about coming across a series of articles in the LA Times that inspired him to, that inspired him to the movies. The articles themselves were about, I think he said, Cambodian refugees that were fleeing from the Khmer Rouge were living in the Los Angeles area, and they started mysteriously dying in their sleep. And these really noteworthy, violent kind of deaths, like these death spasms. And they reported, before they died, they reported having these troubling dreams about people chasing them in their sleep.
That's right.
And so you can see, obviously, how that would lead to the story of Freddy Krueger. But I went and researched the stories, and the odd thing about them, in terms of finding them, is that they were really, really well hidden. For something as famous as that, for something that had inspired as famous a film series and as famous an iconic horror character as Freddy Krueger, those stories just weren't available online. They're very difficult to find in the LA Times archives. Just as a comparison, like the story that inspired the New York Magazine story that inspired Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah,
that's been republished countless times. You know, they keep bringing that up over and over, even though it's the writer admitted that he made the whole thing up. Like, they should be ashamed of it and they should bury that. But this story, this truthful story that seemingly truthful story that inspired the Freddy Krueger stories, the Freddy Krueger films, those were hidden. And I found that Wes Craven either was not being truthful about the details. I don't want to talk ill of the dead. He was either forgetting them or applying some good old show business hustle to make them more interesting in his mind. But the real stories are actually far more interesting than what he was presenting. And so, like I said before, he talked about Cambodian refugees fleeing the Khmer Rouge. Actually, for the most part, they are Laotian, and they're fleeing the, I'm going to get this pronunciation wrong, but the Pathet Lao, the communists in Laos. And there's a population in America of about 35,000 in the late 70s and early 80s. And all of a sudden, in the space of about 2 or 3 years, they all started dying. They all started dying in their sleep for unexplained reasons. They were concentrated in the Los Angeles areas, concentrated around Minneapolis, and Montana, a couple other places. But they're spread out throughout the country, throughout this country. And I'm talking to some European listeners and viewers. And so, but they were refugees with this violent past, and people were really concerned about them, because they thought that at first they had no idea what was happening, and the Hmong people kept telling medical examiners and researchers and officials that nothing like that had happened back in their homeland.
Right.
This is a new phenomenon that started when they got to America. So the first thought is this contagious? Could this spread from the smaller population to the larger one? They were able to rule that out pretty quickly, but then it became this medical mystery that actually came and went without really being solved. It just all of a sudden stopped. I forget exactly how many victims were racked up between 1977 and 1981, but they just stopped all of a sudden, and it led to decades of medical research and
And no real explanation scientifically of why all these deaths occurred at that time.
Well, the science is able to explain a lot of it.
Yeah.
There's the central mystery is why it started at that time with the Hmong, and then why it stopped. Why did it only happen then?
Yes.
Because sleep paralysis is fairly common, but fatal sleep paralysis, thank goodness, is extraordinarily rare.
Absolutely. Now, you never got to interview Wes Craven, did you?
No, sadly enough, he very graciously, said no, and it was shortly before his death, so I think that he was ailing at the time.
Yeah.
Which is a bummer because I was hoping to get the truth. I was hoping that he'd have a tattered newspaper clipping somewhere that would maybe show me that the research I was doing was wrong and I was going down the wrong path, and he had this other story. But what I did find was the story of the Hmong people, and it itself is it's fascinating and it's pretty scary. I think that you could easily make another film series out of it.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was the film that inspired so many other films from that genre, and of course, the Nightmare on Elm Street trilogies. That they went on and on and on. They still go on now. Yeah. Probably they're thinking of redoing the Nightmare on Elm Street films with the iconic Robert Englund again. I think he's going to be coming back in it. So when these deaths were taking place, then did they talk? What did they talk about that presented themselves at night, or they thought in their community was causing this? Did they see it as some sort of paranormal demonic entity that was killing their own people?
Well, the most popular initial theory among the Hmong was that it was the residual effects of nerve gas that was used fighting when they were conscripted to fight the communists by the CIA in a secret war. There's a lot of detail there, but that's the Hmong were a tribal village people. That first they lived in China, and they were driven out in the 1800s, and they mostly settled in Vietnam and Laos. And then during the Vietnam War, under the domino theory of communism in Southeast Asia, the CIA was very active with trying to make sure that communism didn't spread. And one of the groups they reached out to were the Hmong, and they got them to fight the Pathet Lao on the side of the Laotian royalty, and they fought on the losing side, and they were brutalized. They were camps and torture, and then they became refugees and came to America. This is why I was saying this, because the original theory that was very popular among the Hmong was that it was nerve gas. Right. But then medical examiners up and down, they were like, no, there's no way this could be nerve gas. There's nothing about it medically that indicates that. And secondly, there's no nerve gas that waits 4 years to work on the human body. Because while they were refugees, they had been in America for quite some time. But what they found out during interviews, that there had been, while the Hmong had said that this was a new phenomenon, there was this whole ancient folklore about sleep deaths. There was a creature called it's spelled DABTSOG, but it's pronounced Dacho. Is a legendary sleep monster among the Hmong. And you have to bear in mind, again, that these were tribal people, and they were pre-literate. Like even in they didn't even have a written language up until the mid-20th century. And by the time they came to America, even then, very few people spoke it. I think that they were involved with nature worship and ancestor worship, like a very ancient old ways that they're still carrying around. Unlike the modernity of the mid to late 20th century. So this belief, these sleep monsters and these sleep deaths, these sleep troubles, they did have this old folklore history with the Dacho and with this, which was like a sleep monster that people started to say they saw when they were in America. The Hmong started reporting seeing it, and the survivors started reporting seeing it as well. And it kind of, what they said is it looked like an American stuffed animal. Are you familiar with Sesame Street?
Yes.
Okay. Excuse me, a friend of mine's trying to get in the frame. All right. Grover.
Yes.
Imagine Grover, but imagine Grover with a million razor-sharp teeth. and that's what he described, like a Grover doll with like a million razor-sharp teeth.
Right.
And what the dot show, like a lot of, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the way that the dot show would kill people is they would sit on people's chests as they slept, and people would be paralyzed, and they wouldn't be able to do anything. And with the dot show, would sort of just put pressure on your chest and make you unable to breathe and sort of just force your life essence out as you slept. Like I've been thinking of it like a bellows, like
yes.
trying to, push out your air and push out your life essence. And as as it's not the only sleep monster from folklore that works like that. It's actually very common. It's a variation on a global character. There's the night hag in America. There's I don't have my notes with me, but there's just a global phenomenon.
This is culturally, isn't it? It comes under different guises, but culturally, this creature or this whatever this is, is paralyzing people. But they obviously different names, and the idea, what you've just said there as well about the idea, of feeling paralyzed and not being able to move. I mean, I know people that have come up to me and said, I had this awful experience the other night. When I just could not move. And they don't talk about it really to other people, but people do have these experiences.
Yeah, and if people go to my website, I put up a link to there's a documentary about sleep paralysis. I think it's called The Nightmare, and it came out recently. And people relate their stories, and they're really scary. But there's a lot of and they vary, but there's a lot of commonalities. There's usually some sort of dark, lurking figure. It can either be a tall man or a small monster, but always this feeling of paralysis.
Yes.
Which is terrifying. It's this. I'd say it's probably the purest form of helplessness. You can't move or do anything about it. Yeah,
absolutely. And what you've just described there with the teeth and everything else, you could kind of reverse it and see what Wes Craven did with Freddy's glove in a sense.
It's interesting how Freddy Krueger does and yet does not line up with these folklore sleep monsters. Like teeth and sharp things, always there. And obviously Freddy Krueger, has his famous hand and his famous knife hands. And interestingly enough, when it is a humanoid kind of figure, they're almost always wearing a hat. And Freddy Krueger is wearing his tattered fedora.
Right.
But then, he's more colorful. He doesn't just have a dark appearance. His burned skin and that kind of, and certainly the wisecracks. I think that's unique to Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. I think so. But what you're explaining here is so interesting because obviously. What about the idea of being chased then as well? I mean, that's...
Yeah, well, they're coming for you. I mean, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, but they're coming after you, and you're watching helplessly. Usually, maybe there's some sort of tunnel vision. Maybe you just can't get out of bed. You could know that your loved ones are nearby, but you can't get their attention. You can't scream. You can't make a single sound, and you can't move. And while these creatures are coming for you. And in the documentary I mentioned before, people talk about encounters like actually getting a phone call in their dreams, like their phone going off, and answering the phone, and at first this voice saying politely, "Let me in. I'm trying to get in. Please let me into your home." And then they'll say, "What do you want to do?" And then they'll scream like, "I'm going to kill you." Just it escalates very quickly. But again, it's about helplessness. It's about immobility. Yeah.
Well, the idea, as well in the movies as well, you're able to bring things, objects through from your dreams as well, and you get cut, and that will appear in the normal state. I mean, did they ever talk of stories where they were bringing things through, for example?
A little bit. One of my favorite folklore stories I saw was, I think maybe in Estonia or Lithuania, mothers would try to protect their babies from sleep creatures by leaving a knife in their crib, so that way if the monster attacks, then they could immediately. I don't know if it's supposed to be the baby using the knife or the mother. I'd assume the mother. I don't know, but you can have talismanic objects from the waking world that you can bring into the dream to try to protect yourself or to ward off the monster.
Yeah. I mean, on your website as well, which it's all over just on the screen right now. I believe there's the links to the actual original articles that you've dug out from the papers.
That's correct. Yeah, it's I posted the original LA Times articles on my site, and I've been working on a larger project actually about this subject, and so I started contacting the original medical examiners recently, and they're telling me. Whatever they could remember from these 30-year-old incidents. But you go through it and you can see that it's something that people were panicked about. And then when the panic subsided, it became the focus of kind of morbid fascination. And then it just went away. It went away from them all. Like they just stopped. It just stopped happening. And so the science has been very good about scientific research into it. It's been very, very good about finding about the mechanism of how it happened. And I think right now they're trying to just identify the exact genetic line that carries along this fatal sleep paralysis. Like they know exactly how it happens in the heart. They know that it's I think it's in the aorta. They know that it's like what ventricle that is wrong and how they can stop it. And there's ways that they're if you're in danger of dying from this, they have a pacemaker and they can put in that'll set off an electrical charge and will just get you awake, get you away from the show.
Oh my gosh. Right.
But what they don't know is why it happened and why it stopped happening. And there was an academic researcher named Shelley Adler who wrote a book that came out about 4 or 5 years ago called The Nightmare. This is my show. Called The Nightmare. And what she researched this idea of a nocebo, which is sort of like the opposite of a placebo. When you have the placebo effect, which is famous, is you take a placebo, and because you take something and you have this belief it's going to work, that it works. With a nocebo, imagine that it's the absence of a cure. So you're thinking that there's an absence of a cure, even for, and it can have as much of a powerful effect as the placebo. So there are these Hmong people. They show up in America, and they're divorced from their homeland. They're divorced from their traditional tribal life. They're forced to be in modern America in the late 70s and 1980s, and they're very few in numbers, and they're scattered throughout the country. So they did not have access to their traditional means of spiritual support. Yeah. So like like a shaman or some kind of minister. In their traditional society, back in Laos, back in China, if they were having troubled dreams, they had somebody they could talk to who was down a dirt road. Whereas in America, they did not have access to that.
No.
And so Shelley Adler's supposition, I'm probably not getting all the nuances of it, but it's difficult to express. It's a great book. I'd highly recommend it. Her name is Shelley Adler, Adler. The idea is that they kind of inadvertently called the Da Cho. They inadvertently called it to attack them in their sleep. And then the Da Cho used this mechanism of the heart and all this stuff that we know that we've been able to pinpoint through science, that's what caused it to happen. And that's what caused it to be fatal.
Incredible. So, okay, so there's been no other has there been other cases of this phenomenon reported recently?
Well, not recently. Yeah, but they're able to tie it into other deaths that occurred later. I mean, the thing that really brought the attention to it was that maybe like 40 people out of a population of 35,000 in America died from the same mysterious thing. And, that when you have that kind of percentage, that's what, that's going to be alarming for people who are tracking that.
Oh, yeah.
And also, this is something I realized later, and I didn't mention this in the article, but I had this thought the other day, is that, so they were a pre-literate society, so then clearly they were a pre-medical record-keeping society as well. So this might have happened before, but they might just not have annotated it, which is possible. It's also possible that it was truly unique to when they got to America.
Yes.
It stopped with their community. They're able to identify it with other, mostly. Oh, it's mostly young men.
Yeah.
That's a critical thing I should have mentioned earlier. That's part of what made it so mysterious, is that it was affecting young men.
That is surprising, isn't it? So it was only young men that were suffering from this. Yeah,
I mean, it was like 90% men, maybe one woman out of 20. But they're otherwise in fine health, and so that's what made it so very alarming and frightening for people. But they were able to identify other cases and tie it in. I think there had been earlier reports of Filipinos in Filipino naval officers of Filipino extraction, the United States naval enlistees of Filipino extraction in the 1950s. They studied this syndrome, but they're able to tie it in. Now it's called the Brugada syndrome, after the Italian doctors who were brothers that created the pacemaker that people were able to wear to ward it off. But sleep paralysis is universal.
Yes,
I think almost everybody has had some experience with it. But one thing, if your viewers are experiencing that, the nocebo effect that I was talking about earlier is very, very powerful. But you can cancel that out, because this is as much a state of mind and a state of spiritual enemy that you can counteract that. And people with strong beliefs, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, or whether it's some kind of animism, or anything that really you can believe in sincerely, like a pumpkin patch, anything that you can sincerely believe in, that can be effective in warding off sleep monsters and sleep paralysis.
Wow, I mean, you think how vulnerable you are, Adam. When you are asleep, and you imagine what they were going through at that time. That they really must have stayed awake as much as they could have done, and maybe because they all feared it so much, what's happening to their peers and stuff, that they attracted it more towards themselves as well, because they were all fearing it so much, in a sense.
Well, there's a sense of helplessness.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it adds on. And it adds to this toxic stew of emotions and beliefs.
Absolutely.
In the documentary, there's several people they talked to who are suffering from sleep paralysis throughout their lives, and the way that they finally got it to end was usually a spiritual answer of some sort. Like one woman talked about calling on Jesus. She was previously not a religious person, but then she felt this presence, and that was lurching over her, and she called on Jesus, and then she became a born again Christian, a very devout Christian after that, because it was so successful. And then another gentleman talked about sort of on the other side of the spectrum of spirituality and beliefs, talking about calling on like a nature spirit, like a Wiccan nature spirit.
To take it away, yeah.
Then that was effective as well.
I mean, there's been a lot of programs I've heard in the past on shadow people. Is this the same sort of thing? Do you?
I'm sure they're related. I'm sure they're related. If you go through, there's so much folklore, and there's so many stories and so many experiences, and there are a lot of commonalities, and there are a lot of unique points. But the shadow people, for sure. It's probably Slender Man's probably in there. But but yeah, definitely the night hag, and definitely.
The night hag, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's is that the creepy old woman that people talk about coming to sort of kill,
Well,
take
and
away.
also in it's very close in the Philippines. They have the Bangungot. I might be mangling that pronunciation. I apologize to all your Filipino viewers, but that's like the night hag, but it's a wood creature. It's a spirit that lived in the trees, and when they chop down the trees to make homes, the creatures get angry, and they don't like you being in their former. They don't like the use of their former homes that you're doing, so they will creep in. And they'll try to, attack you in your sleep. Yeah.
Yes. In
In
Asia,
a lot of them are female too, which is pretty interesting.
yeah. Well, it's funny you mention it because in Asia, I know that they're very respectful to the forest. They don't just mess it up or leave litter in there or anything like that. There is big folklore in the creatures that live in the forest. And if you go over there, you actually these people, they're fully immersed into this culture, and it's very interesting. Very interesting.
That certainly relates, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does. We've been talking about a documentary as well. Obviously, there's a link on your website with
link on my website, to the trailer. It's really good. I think it's called The Nightmare. It's by the same people that made Room 257, the documentary about The Shining and different theories about The Shining. I think it came out last year, a year or two ago. Underseen film, but it's great. It's really good. I'm not to speak ill of Wes Craven, but it might be even more frightening than the Nightmare on Elm Street films.
The Nightmare on Elm Street films, they really are classics in a sense.
They are. They get more and more cartoonish as they go on.
They did, and I just hope the new ones bring it back to what it should be.
Right, because they do tap into a primal terror, like what we've been talking about.
Yes.
I've talked to a lot of people who suffered from sleep paralysis, and it's something that takes over your life. It just has a grip on you, and it doesn't take over your life in a pleasant way.
No.
Yeah, it's something that you're terrified to go to sleep, and that'll ruin your waking hours as well.
Well, the stories that you've been explaining here, I mean, what do they tell us about the nature of our reality? If there is something very genuine in these deaths and genuine in people's experiences, which why would the masses make it up? Yeah. Then what's that say about the nature of reality in the sense of what we understand is what we see with our eyes and this spectrum that we're able to see? Is there different realities in the same space, and there's a very thin veil sometimes that we just don't understand?
Well, I mean, I think it's certainly open to interpretation. I think it might not be a question of our realities. It might be a question of our perception of our realities. I don't know. I mean, I think I think that just like how I was explaining before about how people find their own ways of dealing with sleep paralysis, and usually it's some sort of spiritual answer, that we can find different ways of interpreting it. Yes. And it might be like how we all perceive color differently.
Sure.
And there's no real red or blue. It's just our perception of light. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's something that an individual has to find an answer for. I don't know if I could say that with any authority.
Well, what would you say was the most interesting aspect of this case for you?
I found it all pretty interesting. I mean, I found that the Hmong are, it's like this forgotten history, and they're still around. Obviously, they only a small fraction of them succumb to the sleep deaths. Yeah. But just finding out about them coming to America, and then they came to America and they started dying in their sleep, and that's fascinating. And also the anytime you get to talk about monsters that really people have seen and they prey upon and have been preyed upon, that's fascinating. Like in Japan, the sleep monster of Japan, it's a beast that's made of different animals. So I think it has like a lion's head and a dragon's tail and wings, and they're all just sort of, and then in illustrations, they're all just sort of patched together. But certainly anytime you can talk about monsters in a serious way, you can't beat that.
It's strange, isn't it? Where does that dark side come from us? Especially when we're children as well, and we have these awful nightmares. What is that about? Where did that reality come from? If it's not something we've seen on TV, where did it come from?
I mean, maybe it's something primal. I don't know. I mean, like I don't know. You look into shadows, like our capacity to be frightened by things. I don't think it needs. It's almost infinite. You don't need to have somebody tell you what is scary. Like you don't need somebody to say, okay, X, Y, and Z are scary things. You're just going to be scared, and you're going to be scared of things that hurt you. You're going to be scared of things that you can't see all the way through. You're going to be scared of things that you don't understand. You're going to be scared of things that have power over you, and situations where you are powerless. Yeah. And certainly, when you're asleep, that's the most vulnerable time. That's the most vulnerable time you can be. I was on another show, and I told a host about when I was researching this. I had this thought about it, like in the shower, and I'm an adult. I'm an adult man, and I'm not particularly superstitious. I'm not particularly fearful, but just thinking about these things, like in the shower, and just like, what if there was something on the other side of that door? What if there was something that was going to come in that wanted to get in? What could I possibly do? And it was just, and it was a hot shower, but I shivered nonetheless.
Yeah.
So none of us are immune to fear. None of us are immune to feeling vulnerable. None of us are immune to being scared. We all have to find our individual solutions to it. Sadly enough, I don't think there's a blanket prescription for it. And what I've been able to see, and if people do have sleep paralysis and they're trying to find an answer for it, it seems that such strong spiritual beliefs have been a very effective countermeasure. I was contacted by this one person who was suffering from sleep paralysis, and they had, I think that in an effort to stay awake, they had turned to narcotics and drugs and things, and that doesn't work. That'll perpetuate the cycle. So stay away from that. Yeah. Another thing for your viewers: don't do crystal meth. They're also going to send rambling emails to people who are on talk shows.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's fascinating, by just doing that one article, how it's taking you in this direction, which you probably didn't see yourself going in, right?
No, I've never suffered from sleep paralysis, but now that I've talked about it so much, I feel like I should knock on wood,
Yeah.
assuming that it's not the wood of a Bangangat tree. Well, I think that would just anger them.
Yeah. Well, no, it really is fascinating what you're doing right now, and I'm sure there's more.
I think it's also inevitable. This is how I'm going to die. Like, I think that this will be my death because it's too poetic. I think that I have to die in my sleep in some mysterious way. But thank you. I'm glad that it's of interest. You can find the original story on a site called Van Winkle's. It's called Sudden and Unexplained: The Sleep Deaths That Inspired Freddy Krueger. And I think it's, I guess I should be more modest, but I think I did a pretty good job with it, and I think it's worth people's time to read.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I would definitely recommend it, and we've linked it all up on here as well. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. It was a pleasure to be here, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.